I'll be very quick, but it's because World Values Day is happening all the time around us, and it's it's something that's been going on for this is the seventh year. We've been going since 2016. And just very quickly, I'll tell you why we started. And this was really the catalyst for the whole thing. There's been a lot of research done, and in particular, a lot of national surveys surveying people's individual values, their personal values. This has been run, the same survey has been run in 20, maybe 30 countries by now. And what tends to come out of these surveys is it's pretty much the same everywhere with some variations, but people individually have really good values. If I say good, I mean positive. You could say pro-social values. All the things people come up with words like caring, compassion, truth, peace, respect, trust. All those sort of words come up wherever you are in the world. I mean, slightly different words, obviously, depending on which language, but essentially those sentiments. And yet, when you ask people about the society they live in, I'm afraid it's absolutely the opposite. What do they think about the society they live in? And the answers are almost, in fact, even more uniformly negative. People don't feel they're living in a society which reflects those values, basically. And when I come from the UK, when this survey was run in the UK, and the results published in 2012, a group of us got together and formed a national values alliance there. And then after a few years later, we started meeting people and formed the campaign called World Values Day. And what we thought, our thought process was, well, there seems to be some disconnect here. If we all have good values, why is it that somehow we're living in a society which doesn't seem to have that values? And we had two conclusions, I guess. One was that we weren't acting on those values, obviously. And the second conclusion was that, the second result of that analysis was we saw that people distrusted, they didn't believe other people had those values. And so the aim of World Values Day, which is an awareness campaign, but it's trying to draw attention to the fact that we all have good values and we want people to express those values, think about those values and express those values in action. With the aim, the aim of actually making people understand that as more and more people join in this campaign, that they're not alone. We're not living in isolated in a world lacking in values. Actually, the world is full of people with values, and it's just a question of connecting each other. And this campaign aims to connect people and be a catalyst for action. So that's really it. We get out to about 45 million people is our reach around the world through social media. I have to say a smaller number of those are probably sparked into action by the campaign, but you've got to plant the seed. So that's what we do, and we're sort of growing bigger every year, and that's the background, which is not irrelevant for the question we're looking at today. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, Charles. Well, thanks very much. And I know all the hard work that goes into something like World Values Day. And I think you ought to be utterly congratulated for your energy and perseverance. So it's lovely to have you now. So let's move on. Thank you very much, Charles, and invite our first speaker. As I say, the topic is the big issues around refugees today. And I think we're going to have a kind of very open discussion. And our first speaker this morning is Catherine Mahoney. Catherine is the global spokesperson for UNHCR. And it's a great pleasure to have Catherine here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Excuse me, my voice is a little weak this morning, so I'll do my best. I hope you can hear me okay. So I want to start this morning. I hope you can all see this. I want to start by asking you to take a look at this picture, if you can see it. What do you see? And for those of you who might be having trouble seeing it, let me describe this image for you. I see mud-covered baby shoes. It's on a white background. And there's glimpses of a cute striped animal, maybe a zebra, that are peeking through the mud that's caking these shoes. I'll put this down. These are shoes for very, very tiny feet. These are feet that might even be attached to legs that aren't yet strong enough to hold up the weight of this young, very tiny body that they're attached to. And to some, this photo might look, I don't know, innocuous. It might conjure an image of a happy baby splashing in mud puddles after a fall rainstorm. But for me, when I saw this image for the first time last week, when my thumb actually stopped on my social media feed, I knew exactly what this image represented. I knew what it meant. I knew the narrative. I knew the story. And quite honestly, it shattered me. So let me tell you what I now know about these shoes. So these little mud cake shoes, they trekked through the jungle, through one of the deadliest passages in the world, simply to find safety. These little baby mud-covered feet walking, fleeing just for safety, just fighting to live. My colleague Margarita, who I work with at UNHCR, which is the United Nations Refugee Agency, she took this photo in Panama. She was in the Darien Gap. Now, last week, there was a journalist from the Guardian newspaper named Luke Taylor, and he described crossing the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia as one of the most dangerous journeys on the planet for experienced survivalists. He went on to say that it can take up to a week on foot, and some succumb to the jungle's flash floods, steep ravines, and turbulent rivers. Now, I now know that the baby who wore these shoes survived this very journey. And my colleagues have told me that in the town of Matiti, the first town after crossing the Darien, people actually dispose of the items that were useful to them in the jungle, but they're too heavy to carry on the onward journey. And that's actually how these shoes got left behind and photographed by my colleague. Now, this year alone in 2022, this child, this baby, is just one of 160,000 other refugees and migrants who have also survived this dangerous crossing. Now, let me pause here. I'm really not here to make you feel bad. I'm not here to guilt you, to depress you, to trigger your compassion fatigue. And really, ideally, at best, I'd hope in my 5 minutes or less to try to inspire you to get curious about the people like this very baby who have been forced to flee their homes. And I hope to encourage and inspire you to take some action by wearing your values and welcoming refugees into your own communities. Now, storytelling is a passion of mine, but today, the 5 minutes that I have and this time that you're giving today, by being here, they're really not for me. If you hear nothing else that I say today, please remember, the refugees that are speaking here today are the most important voices that need to be heard. They are sharing the most important stories that need to be amplified. So Shafiq and Farah and the others here, they will give you the stories of the lived experience of what it means to be forced to flee, forced to uproot, forced to leave everything behind, forced to abandon homes, abandon precious belongings, and even precious family members. And they are the living proof that we live in a world where there are more than 100 million people who have been forced to flee. And I repeat, forced to flee, because fleeing for refugees is not ever a choice. But the reality is that Shafiq and Farah and others we'll hear from today are people. They're just like me. They're just like you. These are people who, like me, we don't want to be defined by what happened to us or by the sum of the choices that they had to make because they were forced into the hardest of circumstances. Circumstances like war, violence, persecution, the very things that force people to flee in the first place. The circumstances that in all likelihood, may have had nothing to do with them. And I'm talking about people who, like us, have names, jobs, skills, family members, hobbies, pets, and probably never, ever expected to have the word refugee added to that list. So really, what can you do about it? There's actually a lot you can do about it. And to name a few things, I would encourage you to find the local resettlement organization or agency that is nearest to you and ask them how you can help welcome refugees in your community. Invite refugees, people who have been forced to flee for a coffee, for a tea. Listen to them. Maybe you're a student. Find out, if you're a student, if there are refugees in your school and meet them. Ask your school, does it have a scholarship fund for refugees? And if it doesn't, we can help you figure out how to start one. Talk to your friends and family about this. And most of all, look at your country's policy on refugee resettlement and encourage your government to keep their borders and hearts open to people that are in search of safety. Because the reality that I want to end on today, and thank you for your time, I want you to think back to those tiny mud cake shoes that I shared in the beginning. The reality is that no parent would ever take their child, on the most dangerous journey in the world if it was in fact safe enough to stay at home. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. That was both moving and hugely informative. And the thing that comes through to me already is the notion of choice, that refugees and I think we'll hear that again and in many videos, there is no choice. And then the choices thereafter are limited, if not altogether removed. And yet the skeptics around the world think that somehow being a refugee is a choice. So maybe that's just one simple thing that we might address and rebalance. Okay, it'd be lovely to hear from, I hope, from Shafiq now. Shafiq is a Rohingya. He's in a camp in Bangladesh. I've already had a brief word with Shafiq, but he's a fabulous young man, and I know he's going to have some really great thoughts to share with us. So thank you very much for being here with us, Shafiq, this morning.
Thank you, Simon, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for listening to everyone. So as Simon mentioned, my name is Shafiqur Rahman, and I was born a refugee. I live in what is now the world's largest refugee settlement in southern Bangladesh. My parents fled the Myanmar military's brutality in the early 90s and walked through jungles, mountains, and swamps for days to eventually reach and take refuge in the neighboring country, Bangladesh. My community has faced decades of systematic discrimination, statelessness, and targeted violence in Rakhine State on the western coast of Myanmar. Such persecution has forced us into Rohingya camp in Bangladesh for many years. With significant exodus following violent attacks in 1978, 1991, and again in 2016. Yet, it was the genocide of August 2017 that triggered by far the largest and fastest refugee influx into Bangladesh. Since then, more than 700,000 Rohingya, including more than 400,000 children, have fled into Cox's Bazar. My community has been fleeing violence and seeking refuge in neighboring countries for the past 3 decades. Today, the biggest issue for my community is access to proper education for the children that make up more than half the Rohingya refugee population. Other related concerns are youth development, livelihood, and security of life. We are experiencing loss of generation after generation due to the lack of proper education. We cannot even expect our children to have basic education, let alone have a shot at becoming a doctor, engineer, pilot, or a scientist. Bangladeshi schools and colleges do not accept Rohingya students. Their doors are closed for us. The schools in the camps teach a limited curriculum and cannot cater to even a fraction of the population. Imagine what we're losing here in this refugee line. My community has started to lose their culture and tradition due to the lack of education. The youth are being led astray by radicalism and drugs because they have no avenues to productively spend their time. Women do not feel safe, and violence against women is at an all-time high. I recently got married, and now I have an amazingly beautiful daughter with the blessing of Allah. I want to raise her in a safe environment where she can pursue higher education without any obstacles, just like your children and other children around the world. I would like to send her to a great school where she can dream of a life with dignity, without violence or hatred or discrimination. But I am saddened every day when I realize that may never happen, because I am not considered a normal human being like you. I am a Rohingya refugee without a nation, identity, or anyone who really cares about me. How many more generations do we have to lose without having proper education in this refugee life? How long do we have to continue to be refugees? What does our future look like? What and where is our durable solution? These are the questions that I ask every day. I ask myself every day. And I'd like to ask everyone on this panel today the very same questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Shafiq. Well, of course, the shame of it is that we can't answer your question, but indeed would like to. I would like to ask Vincent to speak to us now. Vincent, professor at Montgomery College in Maryland, and a great and wonderful commentator on these things. So it'd be a very good idea to have Vincent's input and thoughts on the big issues surrounding refugees today. Thank you very much, Vincent. You're still on mute, actually, Vincent.
Sorry about that. Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to be speaking today and be with all of these people on this panel. This week marks the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest we have ever come to ending life on the planet. 60 years later, and we again find ourselves faced with the real threat of nuclear annihilation. With Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has repeatedly threatened to use nuclear weapons and continues to hold Ukraine and the world hostage to his terrorism by threatening to start a nuclear war. We have seen what nuclear weapons can do. In addition to the catastrophic death and destruction they bring, so many have become refugees because of nuclear testing. People from the Marshall Islands, Native Americans, Australian Aborigines, people from Kazakhstan and the Sahara, and more have lost their homes and land to nuclear testing, making them refugees. And it is no coincidence that most affected have historically been people of color and from the global South. Today, there are millions of refugees who desperately need the world's help from war, famine, terrorism, and climate change. However, if nuclear weapons were to be used today, that number would climb into the billions. If just Pakistan and India were to have a nuclear exchange, we would see a humanitarian crisis the likes of which we have never witnessed. A war fought using 1,000 nuclear weapons, around 5% of the total global stockpile, would render the planet inhabitable. A regional nuclear war involving around 100 Hiroshima-sized bombs would disrupt the global climate and agricultural production so severely that more than 1 billion people would be at risk of famine. The smoke and dust from a limited nuclear war would cause a drop in global temperature and rainfall by blocking up to 10% of sunlight from reaching the Earth's surface. Global cooling would shorten the growing seasons, threatening agriculture worldwide. Increases in food prices would make food inaccessible to hundreds of millions of the poorest people in the world. For those who are already chronically malnourished, just a 10% decline in food consumption would result in starvation. Infectious disease, epidemics, and conflict over scarce resources would be rife. If the entire global nuclear arsenal were used, 150 million tons of smoke would be emitted into the stratosphere, resulting in a 45% global reduction in rainfall and average surface cooling, bringing us closer to another ice age. A nuclear war would cause prolonged and severe depletion of the ozone layer and have a devastating impact on human and animal health. Substantial increases in ultraviolet radiation would cause increases in skin cancer, crop damage, and the destruction of marine life. In short, billions would instantly become refugees. Therefore, on this day and every day, we need to be fighting to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. We must do everything we can to help those in need now. But the key is to prevent a refugee crisis of catastrophic proportions in the future. I believe the best way to do this is to eliminate all nuclear weapons from the earth and have every nation join the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which was signed over by 120 nations, ratified and entered into force on January 22nd, 2021. In the 1980s, millions from around the world marched and rallied to halt the nuclear arms race. And it worked. Citizen mobilization played a role in Gorbachev and Reagan changing course on nuclear weapons. We now need to do this again. We must make clear that we will not stand by and allow for future generations to live in fear of dying from nuclear war or becoming refugees as a result of the decisions made by leaders of those countries in the nuclear club. Today, we should be asking ourselves, what are our values as individuals and as citizens of the world? What do we value for our children? We all have gifts, and what you do with them is your gift back. So let today, let this moment be the time where you make the decision that we all say with one voice united, no more refugees, no more racism, no more Hiroshimas. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. That's of course very powerful, and I'm always reminded that one of the first terrible things that ushered in the 21st century was a tsunami that overtook the coastline, people sleeping quietly, and it seemed to kind of be a presage to me for the 21st century. That notion of the tsunami, of terrible things that happen whilst we sit and sleep and wait. So that threat of nuclear war is, of course, the ultimate tsunami, and we really have to address it, as you say. And of course, war is the biggest generator of refugees, war and violence. So something we must be ourselves responsible for in some way. Okay, it'd be great now to hear from Syed Abul Farah. I've spoken to Syed briefly. Syed is a bit of a legend in Bangladesh. He works for ActionAid. He works also in the Rohingya community, but I have no, issues about having another representative in the Rohingya community, or indeed many more. So it's going to be great to hear from Syed, and he's someone that has lived and worked in the community for, I think, 25 years. He'll probably correct me, if not more. So he has enormous experience of the issues and the challenges being faced in the Rohingya community, but I suspect among all refugees worldwide. Thanks, Syed.
Thanks, Shimon. Welcome, everyone. There are around 90 million refugees, displaced people in the world, and around 27 million refugees. And the refugees are facing different problems, which you have discussed. I am working for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and I work for community-based protection. It is supported by UNHCR. In fact, our spirit is to build community empowerment, community initiative, and community-based solution for their protection. These are our activities. And the Rohingya crisis, it is around 200 to 300 years old crisis. British colonization in India, Bangladesh was from the year 1757 to 1947. Burmese king Budapaya captured Arakan in the year 1784. About 13,000 Arakanis escaped the atrocities of the Burmese king and fled to Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. It is 238 years old story. Wow. At that time, in 1796, in the year 1796, East India Company, the British ruler, they sent a captain named Cox. His responsibility was to mobilize and deal with century-long conflict between Arakan refugees and local Rakhines. But he couldn't complete his task. He was died, and the action also ended there, but the conflict continuing. Bangladesh became independent through a liberation war in the year 1971. Rohingya people were entering Bangladesh before liberation. At the same time, hundreds of thousands Rohingya have fled to another countries in South Asia, including Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. Some refugees are also living in India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. And we know Rohingya refugee people free, leaving everything behind. They begin another life in a different country with different laws, different education and health system, different language and different culture. They need to adjust, and these setup are temporary. They have to leave and displaced again because it is not their country, but where is their destination? In Bangladesh, Rohingya people express their deep gratitude to Bangladeshi people and government. They are getting food, shelter, health, wash facilities, basic education, and protection services. They are getting these as relief. No human like to live on relief. In an assessment, it is called Refugee Influx Emergency Vulnerability Assessment. In that assessment, it is on June 2022. In the assessment, it was seen that the vulnerability of the Rohingya people are not reducing. They are with inadequate food consumption, and they entirely dependent on humanitarian assistance. And their expenditure, 71% expenditure, monthly expenditure is for food. And 36% Rohingya households borrowed food or relied on support from friends or relatives. Resilience of Rohingya remain very low. 64% face at least one crisis or emergency every year, and 79% take loan or indebted. Heightened unemployment rate, and in Bangladesh, they cannot cross the fence of the camp, and they cannot go for employment. 1/3 households selling part of their assistance, the assistance those they receive from different actors. Bangladesh is the 8th most populous country with population density of 1,265 people per square kilometer. It's a big load for Bangladesh to carry out support for Rohingya people, and still Bangladesh continuing its support. Recently, there was Bangladesh-Myanmar border problem, bombing, firing by Myanmar army inside their territory in the Rohingya residing location. It was a big problem for Bangladesh. Several times bomb shell came into Bangladesh area. So in this situation, Rohingya people are passing their life in their country and also in Bangladesh. Nearly 1,000 ethnic Rohingyas from Rakhine state have been arrested for trying to migrate in another region of the Myanmar. This is the common feature of the Rohingya people, like other refugees. So this needs some solution, some way out, and the Shafiq said durable solutions or other discussion said. Durable solution is so it is solution, find a solution, and implementing it's a big problem, and it depends on different countries, and it is political issues. We can think if we think how to solve it in simple scale, in simply that is among our initiatives, like we can try to develop their skill of the people. They can use this skill in the host country, and if they migrate or resettle in another country, they can use that skill. Need their livelihood option, education, and in Bangladesh they are not yet getting a full formal education. There is some piloting are arranging for education. It is Myanmar curriculum. So it is not fully continuing because there are some different opinion among the Rohingya people. Expanding there, it could be an option, expanding access to resettlement of the refugees in third countries, or offering other complementary pathways, fostering conditions that enable refugees to voluntarily return to their home countries. I don't know how this could be, but in here in Bangladesh, refugees are trying to return back to their countries, and some people also resettling them in their own country, that is in Myanmar. It is happening, and with some problems. Yes, thank you. I remain here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The complexity of these problems is both mind-boggling and tragic. So thank you for the overview of some of the very difficult things that are being faced in Bangladesh. Let's go to Farah in Kenya. I think Farah is in the Kakuma camp in Kenya, and he represents Step Up One charity, I think. But he's here with his first-hand experiences. So it's great that you're here, Farah, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate your time. My name is Farah Ibrahim. I'm a Step Up One refugee graduate and a team leader at Step Up One. So originally, I'm from Somalia. You may, most of you may know Somalia maybe for the wrong reason. Maybe you have heard there's a bomb or something that happened in Somalia. I'm from Somalia. We left Somalia in 2009 when my dad felt that our life was in threat. It was so difficult for me. I was 12 years old at that time, and it was so difficult for me to leave the only place that I called home, where I knew, where I had a lot of, like most of my friends and all that. I never thought in my dream that I will go to a different country. So we had to leave. The circumstance forced us to leave our beloved country to come to a refugee camp called the Dab Refugee Camps. That's in Kenya, actually. So Kakuma is also another refugee camp in Kenya. So personally, we came there, and I took most of my time in a refugee camp, more than 10 years. So I have learned my finished my primary education and secondary education in this refugee camp. And when I was learning, actually, I had a dream. I had a dream that one day I will land in a good job and earn, then pay back to my parents and give back to the society that actually supported me when I was I was actually struggling. But when I finished high school, the situation came different. So in the refugee camps, there is, especially those refugee camps in Kenya, there is education. Yes, UNHCR provides us with free education. But when you finish school, the job opportunity is almost non-existent. So I was stressed for almost some years living in these refugee camps. The parents are expecting you, because now you finished high school, and they're expecting you to work and maybe give them something. So one fine day, that is when a friend of mine from Kakuma sent me a link and told me this is what we call Step Up One. It is a social impact enterprise, reskilling refugees, and they not only reskill refugees but also give them opportunities to work with global opportunities and global clients. So that's how I joined Step Up One, and that was my journey. And for sure, as a refugee, I was actually the speech from Catherine, and when actually Shafiq was talking about that, I was actually relating with it because it's something that I've experienced firsthand. So that is, I think, a little bit background about myself living in a refugee camp, living my country, and have to live in a refugee camp for decades. So a little bit about Step Up One. This is a refugee issue. So normally when we hear of refugees, there is one way that majority of the NGOs and even the global communities try to help, and that is provide donations. To tell you the fact, yes, that helps, but how long? They say if you give a fish to someone, that is food for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, you give them food lifetime. So a Step Up One approach is quite different from the other donations and charities. What it does is that it reskills refugees. It gives the refugees a marketable skill. So when they are skilled, they also connect them to global opportunities. So if you once understand or you go through Step Up One system and learn the skills, then you have food for a lifetime. So that is what we do. Right now, we are almost working with hundreds of global clients, and we are expecting to grow even more. And that's what we are doing. We have given opportunity to almost 200 refugee graduates who was like me when I finished my high school, and we are on a mission to reskill and employ 1 million refugees. That is our mission, and we are where we are targeting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Farah. And I have to say, you fill me with admiration for your cheer and positive energy in such difficult circumstances and times. So it's been fantastic already to feel the vibes from you this morning. Let's go to Allegra, it's very nice of you to join us, Allegra. I know you've come hot from another meeting, as it were, but thank you very much for joining in. Allegra is from Italy Must Act, and I suppose it's an apposite title, since Italy does frequently face very difficult refugee issues and is often at the forefront of controversy, not probably of its own making. So it's great to have Allegra here, and I'm sure she'll have some, fab ideas to share. I think you're still on mute, Allegra, so be great to hear from you now. Thanks so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me. I know it was a little bit last minute also invitation. I know that Cristina Molfetta was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she couldn't come. So I was very pleased to receive your call and come here to talk a little bit about what we do and about what is the general Italian context. Unfortunately, I came a little bit late because I was in another meeting, so I missed, I think, 1 or 2 presentations. But it was very interesting to listen to Farah and Syed. So to have also another point of view. So I see that the point of view here, the points of view are different. It's very interesting since I'm very much focused on Europe and Italy. So it's good to have perspectives from other countries. I'm here to represent Italy Must Act and Florence Must Act. I will explain you very briefly who we are. We are the Italian section of the social movement Europe Must Act. I don't know if some of you already know Europe Must Act is a social movement that started in 2020, March 2020, out of the situation that you might know was present and still is present in the Greek islands of the Aegean. After the EU-Turkey so-called deal between the European Union and Turkey, after the let's say the mass migration and flow of people coming from Syria and from Afghanistan and Iraq, which had a peak in 2015-16. Actually, I always like to say that it was not a crisis of people, it was not a crisis of number, it was a crisis of the European Union. So it was the European Union that in 28 member states was not able to respond to this so-called crisis by taking the responsibility. We have this in our treaties, there is an article 80 of the treaty of one of the main treaties of the European Union that talks about the principle of solidarity, which means that when there is a mass influx of people in one of the member states, also other member states should come and help that member state. And this happened in from 2016 onwards, especially in Greece, in Italy, in Malta, in Spain, in the Southern European countries. So this just to say that in 2020, more than 160 NGOs and more than 100 of individuals, like civil society people, signed a petition that created then the European social movement Europe Must Act. The movement was aimed at calling on people and local and national institutions calling for the evacuation of the camps on the Greek islands. I myself worked in the camp of Moria, which was the worst refugee camp in Europe, on the island of Lesbos, and many other friends and colleagues from Europe Must Act were in Greece by that time. Since 2020, we then developed a movement in Europe through local chapters. So we work through local chapters, so local groups of people that work in their cities to raise awareness on the situation at the borders of Europe, and that also put pressure on their local institutions to ask for municipal relocation. So it is not possible at the moment. We don't even have a national relocation program in Italy, which means, having, let's say, an agreement among member states to divide the number of people that are arriving, so to enable them to have dignified reception conditions in each member state, avoiding the camp approach, which is instead the approach that apparently the European Union is pursuing. So in the past years, we've seen a European Union that has been more and more focused on externalizing the borders. So externalizing the right to, not guaranteeing, the right to asylum, thus giving the responsibility of managing migration flows to third member states. So we have seen how the European Union has managed the Turkey deal, which was just a blueprint for other agreements with Libya, indeed. So Italy was the first member state to have an agreement with Libya to return migrants to a country which is internationally recognized as a non-safe country, and also with Tunisia and other member states. So this is a bit the general overview. What do we do? At local level, we try to put pressure to change the policies at European level and to ask for the local municipalities to have more voice. Because in the end, what happens is that it's the local municipalities, it's the cities that have the main responsibility of integrating people and giving refugees and asylum seekers the opportunity to find a new life in their cities. So one big problem in Europe is, of course, the border approach. And the other problem is that, okay, when people arrive then in a city, what happens to them? And here I come to talk about Italy. We recently created the Italy Must Act, so the Italian section of the movement. But before this, I founded, together with other people here in Florence, I'm from Florence, I'm now in Florence, Italy, a local chapter of the movement. So we started we actually created this movement by just organizing a demonstration to ask for the evacuation of the Moria camp and the relocation of people to Italian cities. Now we are a big group of people that organize events. We try to raise awareness and to talk about these issues because, as you all might know, it's not very, very easy, especially in my country, in Italy, to have a real dialogue and discussion about migration and asylum matters, since this topic has been very much instrumentalized by political forces, and you might see my surname. Is not the most happy here in Italy surname, because we have had a lot of, let's say, a big instrumentalization of the topic of migration, especially with the arrivals in Italy, not really talking about what could have been the real solutions. And we do have, some of you might not know, we do have a good model of integration in Italy, which is called Rete SAI, is a system of reception and integration, which is optional for municipalities. So municipalities can choose whether to open a SAI system on their territory or not. Unfortunately, for the moment, we only have around 700 municipalities out of 7,000 municipalities that have this system. And this is a system that allows people to come to Italy, to live in a center, but also to integrate. So to do Italian lessons, to start doing traineeships, to, starting to see how their life could look like in this country. Whereas the other system of reception is just an emergency system. And this, I would say, is the main problem in Italy. We are still dealing with a structural factor in a very emergency way. So we only have emergency solutions to a structural factor, which is migration. I'm coming to an end, just two more things, so sorry. And then linked to this, if I have to talk about, let's say, my territorial and regional context, but I can say that is also a national issue. We have the issue of housing and access to housing and access to the labor market, which is very difficult for migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. And thus, related to this, the link between the reception, the reception system and the civil society. So it's not very linked, and most of this depends on the fact that we still treat this topic as an emergency topic and not as a structural issue. And all the rest is, is just a domino effect. But I would just like to stress that all the issues are linked. So from the European level and Dublin regulation, I don't know if you're aware of this. Many of you probably are not from Europe, but there are some European regulations and the European framework of the new commission that deals with migration as well in a very security, like managing the migration and asylum issue as a security matter.
Thank you, Allegra. I think we're just almost out of time, so I'm sorry.
Sorry, but thank you very much.
I just wanted to end with kind of putting each of you on the spot, because I wanted to end with a positive note and with a note of hope. And as one of you said, or probably two of you said, dreams. So just very quickly, if you could give us a sentence each, starting with Catherine, kind of on a positive, a hope that you want to generate out of not just this discussion, but what we do with the issue of refugees today.
Thank you so much. A lot of pressure to kick this one off. I guess on a personal level, I would say my personal dream, linking to my profession, would be I would personally and professionally hope that I could pass my job and my mic to a refugee. I think the most important thing that could happen for the UN Refugee Agency would be to have a refugee spokesperson. And on a broader sort of systemic social scale, as I mentioned earlier, I hope that we all take very seriously our own personal responsibility to show our values by showing our own agency to better welcome refugees in all of our communities, wherever we find ourselves, and to advocate to our governments to resettle more refugees and to keep our hearts and borders open to people in need of safety. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here briefly for an hour with us. Thank you, Charles. If you'd like to add a quick thought, that would be great.
The thought is really only that all I can suggest is we just need to learn much, much more about this whole issue. We don't need to know that much more to know it's an alarming and huge and heartbreaking issue, but we need to know a little bit more to how I'm speaking as a member of the general public, a non-specialist and a non-refugee, how we can individually help. What can we all do? I think there have been some good suggestions during the day. We can put pressure on our governments. We can open our homes, open our hearts, all of that. But I just love to find, a way that we can be practical help. But thank you all so much.
Thank you, Charles. And Shafiq, can we hear briefly from you? You spoke so eloquently earlier about your situation. Give us a hope and dream to go forward with.
So thank you so much, Simon, first of all, and thank you, everyone. So for me, talking about personal dreams and hope is really difficult, because the situation that we're experiencing on a daily basis here in the refugee camp and refugee life is very difficult to dream of. So for me, I'm just dreaming of, or I'm just hoping that I could be a better father, so I can raise my children in a way that they don't have to experience this horrible life, this horrible situation. And all my efforts to do something for the community, to do something for my family, it will be just for my family and community. There is nothing I can dream and I can hope for myself. It's because of the situation that we have here in the.
Well, that's heartrending, Shafiq. Can I ask Vincent to give us a thought too, just to close with?
Sure. It's easy to fall into despair. It's easy to think for somebody like myself that has dedicated my life and my research to eliminating racism and nuclear weapons, that these things may still be with us when I am no longer on the planet. But that doesn't mean you do not fight. South Africa gave up its nuclear weapons program. If you would have told atomic bomb survivors in 1945 that we would have a nuclear weapons ban treaty in 2021, they probably would not have believed you. So we do progress and we do move forward, and there are daily acts of resistance and there are the larger acts of resistance. And so all we can do is every single day is think to ourselves, did we do everything we could to make this world a better place, to make sure that we help those who are most in need? And if we can answer yes to that, that's all we can do and move forward. But never forget, never despair that we are moving forward, and there can be peace and there can be a world without nuclear weapons and without refugees if we work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much. And Syed, can you give us a view from Bangladesh? Just one quick thought.
From my vision or my dream that about no statelessness, and I try to speak on it, and always saying on this issue how we can stop statelessness and try to mobilize on it. Thanks to all. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And also the happy World Values Day.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. And Farah, can you close out the broadcast before we get to Allegro? Just give us a thought to end with.
Yeah, I would like to first say thank you so much for holding such a very interactive and very beneficial meeting. I would like to thank you, Simon, for the invite. So my quick suggestion will be, as much as we are trying to address refugee problems, let's try to touch the root cause and try to prevent more refugees, creating more refugees. And for those already existing refugees, let's try to skill them with a marketable skill that can help them lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. And closing off with you, Allegra.
Yes, very quickly. Sorry, I took a lot of time before. My dream would be to have more mobilization of people on these topics. Sometimes I feel that it's just of course, a small bubble of those who work on the topic or those who are directly touched by it. But I believe that if even other people who are not directly touched by these issues, maybe, but who could join their forces, this would have an impact, I believe. So thank you very much for inviting me, and